Hello everyone and welcome back to It's a Sign, and if you're joining us for the first time, thank you, and we're very excited to be back. We had to take a little break because we got really dove in head first into some house renovation projects and we just didn't have a wink of time, but we're coming back with something awesome. In today's podcast, we are covering ancient Egyptian mysticism and religious beliefs. And we're going to explore the fascinating world of one of the most intriguing civilizations in history.
It's got to be the Egyptians, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For thousands of years, the ancient Egyptians developed a complex system of beliefs that shaped their culture and way of life. From their awe-inspiring pyramids to their intricate hieroglyphs, every aspect of their society was deeply intertwined with their mystical beliefs. So join us as we delve into the mysteries of ancient Egyptian religion and its many gods and goddesses, or as they were called back then, neters or neterju. And as we go deeper into the episode, we'll find out that the gods and goddesses weren't really gods and goddesses at all.
Yeah, there is a lot of gods and goddesses or netters in Egypt, and I even know a few witches who work with Egyptian gods and goddesses, and I myself have even dabbled a little bit into that, but it's just such a huge realm to dive into in a sense, because there's so many of them. So it'd be really interesting today to dive into that and why are there so many, what do they mean, and how could one civilization possibly dedicate themselves to so many gods and goddesses.
So one thing that we'll just clarify right off the spot, to clarify between gods and goddesses and netters. Gods and goddesses refer to a deific sort of worshipping, where the individual in worship believes that this god or goddess is a form that is real, like the Christian God, that they believe that there is a God, an actual figure that exists within the universe as a separate entity to themselves. The netters, on the other hand, are principles. They're universal forces that run throughout the world and are not separate from the initiate or practice within that mystical tradition. The netters are believed to be heightened aspects of our consciousness that we can synchronize to through religious practice. And so in that way, the netters are not separate from ourselves, but within us.
Yeah.
So throughout this episode, we're also going to explore the secrets of ancient Egyptians' sacred ritual and ceremonies and their belief of the afterlife. We'll also examine the role of magic and sorcery in ancient Egyptian culture and how they believed in the power of amulets and talismans to protect them from harm. We'll also look at their religious beliefs and how they influence their daily lives, including their approach to medicine and science. So sit back, relax, and let us transport you to a world of ancient mysteries and wonders. So to start off, let's go into, before we get into the netters and the gods and the magic, let's get into how their beliefs influence their daily life. So the ancient Egyptians, as many of you know, are well known for their complex religious beliefs and practices that played a significant role in shaping their everyday lives. Religion was not just a way of explaining the world around them, but it also provided a framework for their society, morality, and daily activities. To begin with, the ancient Egyptians believed in a multitude of netters, or universal forces, who controlled various aspects of their lives. Each netter had a specific role to play within the cosmos, and the ancient Egyptians believed that by connecting, worshipping, and devoting themselves to specific aspects of the cosmos that in turn would influence their life. For example, the neter Osiris was associated with the afterlife, and the ancient Egyptians believed that by performing certain rituals, they could ensure a successful journey to the afterlife and beyond. Religious beliefs also influenced the way the ancient Egyptians treated their bodies. They believed that the body was a vessel for the soul, and that it must be preserved after death to ensure a successful journey to the life beyond. This belief led to the practice of mummification, where the body was preserved through a complex process of embalming and wrapping in linen bandages. We all know about mummification, and it was not just reserved for the elite, but it was practiced by common people, indicating that the widespread belief in the importance of preserving the body. And we'll get into a little bit more around the spiritual side of mummification. So their religious beliefs also influenced their medicine and healing, because they believed that illness was caused first by spiritual forces. So forces that we can't see, forces that are unexplained, forces that exist in a more etheric realm that permeated down within to the physical. And they sought to cure it through a combination of magic and herbal medicine, as well as sound. And they believed that certain amulets imbued with the right energy and frequency could ward off evil spirits and protect them from disease. They also used medicinal plants and herbs to treat ailments, and many of these treatments have been proven efficient by modern medicine. So,
yeah, like I know that sort of the little I know about Egyptian gods and goddesses. I know Bast, that like cat head, like house cat head goddess. People have symbols of her in their home because it's like represents a protector of the house.
right.
So if you want to like sort of protect your house from like bad energy or bad spirits, it would be good to have like a lot of symbols of Bast around.
Yeah, definitely. And symbols are just symbols unless you're evoking them. So there is a very powerful way that symbols are ways to connect with these neters, with these universal principles and forces. But if they're not invoked or they're not done through, they're not activated, then these symbols are just symbols. And we can look at symbols within ancient Egyptian society as metaphors. They're pictographical metaphors to help the human mind make reason of something that is unreasonable or unquantifiable. So that's what these symbols serve. They're a way for the mind to attach to something that's intangible. And we have to start off by going over a concept that is very kind of at the root of everything within ancient Egyptian philosophy and how they viewed themselves as individuals. And this concept is the concept of the Ba and the Ka bodies. In ancient Egyptian belief, the Ka and Ba were two separate entities that together formed your soul. The Ka was often depicted as a double of the physical body with the same shape and form, and was believed to be created at the moment of birth. And the Ka was considered to be the life force of a person and was thought to live on after death. And it was believed that the Ka needed to be sustained by offerings and rituals in order to continue to thrive in the afterlife. The Ka was also thought to be responsible for the person's individuality, personality, and essence. The Ba, on the other hand, was depicted as a bird with a human head. So, like an eagle with a human head. And this was a representation, a metaphor, a symbol of the ability to move between the physical and spiritual realms. The Ba was thought to be created at the moment of death and was responsible for the person's ability to move freely in the afterlife. The Ba was believed to be able to travel between the world of the living and the world of the dead, and was often depicted as hovering over the body of the deceased during funeral ceremonies. So what I relate to the Ba is the astral body, because the astral body is able to to travel between both realms. It can observe the physical and it can observe the spiritual or the world of the dead. And when you often have an astral projection experience, when you're transitioning from your physical body to your Ba body or your astral body, it can feel like a process of death, of letting go of your attachments to the physical world. And often people who have experienced an astral projection experience say that they're hovering over their physical body. Yeah. So it's very similar things here.
But they say the bar is created at actual death, though.
Right, but there can be many deaths throughout a life, and the practices of many spiritual traditions is to learn how to die and how to navigate the afterlife before the actual death. And so while most people may experience, not most people, while a few people might experience a spontaneous astral projection experience, a lot of spiritual practices are dedicated, or a main part of it is learning how to access this.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Astral body.
And I feel like it could possibly even explain things like what a lot of people have experienced with ghosts and poltergeists. Like maybe these are people who in life didn't really master their bar. Yeah. So they became very attached to this realm that they almost couldn't even leave it. So they remain in spirit form. Yeah,
in a spirit purgatory. And they're not able to transition through the stages of the afterlife.
Yeah, and it would be a great explanation for that because, you know, sometimes it can be the more like spiritual you become, the less you can understand like why there are ghosts, right?
Yeah.
You know, because you think there is an afterlife, there is a place to go beyond this. Like what can possibly explain why there are these spirits that stick around?
Yeah.
And they like remember their life as it was.
Yeah.
And they sort of stay stuck as that person.
Right. And whatever it is that's attaching them to the physical world is often what they will continue to propagate, like to continue to repeat over and over again. So
like stick into a certain household or something.
Yeah, or trauma. Like, you know, something like that. And even the Native Americans believed in something called ghost sickness, which we covered in another episode. Yeah. Which is, and since the ancient Egyptians believed that there was a spiritual, that sickness came from the other realm before it hit the physical body, then, you know, ghost sickness isn't too implausible. But together the Ka and Ba were thought to form a person's soul, and their reunification in the afterlife was essential for achieving eternal life. So perhaps it was the Ka that lingered and the Ba that went free, and if the Ka and Ba aren't reunited, then one can, maybe the Ka wanders aimlessly until the Ba can reunite with the Ka. But once they were reunited, it was essential for achieving eternal life. So this is some sort of notion of enlightenment, I think, within the ancient Egyptian beliefs. The process of mummification and burial was believed to help preserve the physical body so that the Ka and Ba could return to it in the afterlife. It was also believed that the deceased needed to pass through a series of trials and rituals in order to be judged by the neters and reach the afterlife. And once in the afterlife, the Ka and Ba would be reunited and the person would continue to exist in a state of eternal life. Kind of reminds me of some of the yogis who are able to just choose when they die and just leave their body and continue like work in the astral dimensions and choose not to incarnate back into the physical plane. So throughout this podcast, we'll be referencing a specific book. And this book was written by Isha Schwaller de Lubitz, and she was from France. And she's a very awesome Egyptologist and archaeologist. And she kind of steered away from the mainstream narrative of things and really just dove into the evidence and came up with all these really cool, research on Egyptian initiation practices, rituals, and magic. And according to Schwaller, the Ka and Ba, while they were often depicted as two two separate aspects of the human soul. They were actually one and the same. The ka was seen as the life force, like we talked about, or vital essence of a person, and was thought to be present in all living things, not just humans. And in some of her writings, Schwaller compares the ka to the Chinese concept of qi, which is also understood as a vital energy that flows through all living things, or prana.
Prana, I was going to say, yeah.
Indian. And the ba, on the other hand, was seen as the aspect of the soul that allowed for communication with the divine. The ba was often, like we said, depicted with a bird and a head, so it can travel freely between the physical and spiritual realms. And the ba was also associated with the breath, and that the act of breathing was seen as a way of connecting with the divine. And the breath is the element of air as well, the ability, and that air is often our consciousness, our ability to leave behind our worldly attachments.
Yeah, it makes sense that it's represented by a bird because they obviously are very air-based.
Yeah. And the ability to soar between two planes, the sky and the earth.
Yeah.
And, in ancient Egyptian mythology, there was Nut and Geb. And Nut is depicted as this, woman who's arching over the sky with stars on her body. And Geb is the earth. And so it's kind of showing the two separate planes of existence. So Isha Schwaller writes, quote, that the ka and ba are two different functions of the same principle, and the union of the two is the goal of human life. And in this view, the physical body was seen as a vessel for the soul, which could only achieve its true purpose by uniting the ka and ba in a state of spiritual harmony. Isha Schwaller's research into ancient Egyptian spiritual beliefs and practices reveals that also that sacred sound was an important tool for healing and spiritual transformation. So the Egyptians believed that sound vibrations had the power to heal the body and transform the spirit, and incorporated a wide range of sound-based practices into their rituals and healing ceremonies. And we kind of see this throughout most spiritual traditions: chanting, music, drumming. That's nothing new. And one of the key sound practices in ancient Egypt was actually chanting. And chanting was used in a variety of contexts, from religious ceremonies to healing rituals. And chants were typically repetitive, with a particular emphasis on the repetition of specific words or phrases. Get to chanting, there's something that we have to talk about, because you can chant something over and over again and you may see no results. And one thing I've learned from just dabbling in the yogic practices, which are heavily influenced by chanting as mantras and chanting, is that it's not the word specifically that you're saying, because you could say Om, right? Which is the seed syllable for the cosmos within the ancient Indian tradition. Or you could chant it in a way, but you have to actually hit a specific frequency, resonance, and toning within your body, or else you're not actually activating that sound. Do you know what I'm trying to say here? Yeah. So it's not the word, but it's the way you invoke the word through the sound and through your voice. So chanting must be done by reaching specific frequencies and harmonies and tones, or else it's just very similar to singing. You can still get some benefits out of it, but until you hit those precise frequencies, you won't be changing anything within your biochemistry.
Yeah, but then, if you look at other ancient traditions, within witchcraft and paganism, a lot of spells are crafted and done by repeating words over and over, you know, and they're still able to obtain the results of the spell.
Yeah, possibly that. I think you can earn like a result of a certain manifestation by repeating something over and over in your mind.
Yeah.
Right? But in the physical world, things are all vibrations. Things are all frequency. So to tap into the true potential of a chant, of a tone, of a word or magical phrase, you have to be hitting that frequency that's needed. Because you can say something over and over again, like Hecate, Isis, Osiris. You can say that, but it's not actually just the frequency, but how you're invoking it within your body. You can say it, or you can just say it, you know? It's how you're conjuring it.
Do you think it has a connection with like the intention as well that's held behind what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's all mixed together.
Yeah.
So the repetition of these sounds had the literal power to alter consciousness, creating different states of mind, depending on what they were trying to conjure, and open the individual up to spiritual insight and healing. In addition to chanting, the Egyptians also used a wide range of musical instruments in their rituals, and these included drums, flutes, harps, and stringed instruments. And each instrument was believed to have a particular resonance or vibrational quality that could be used to affect the body and mind in different ways. Like if you think of a harp and the way the way that sounds and feels in your body. And there's this great harpist called Annie Williams who creates these ancient Egyptian soundscapes. And so she's really cool. I might put up a little clip of that, but you can kind of feel the temple magic within that. And then if you imagine what a flute would feel like as well, there's very different qualities to them, so they might invoke these different instruments in different ways. Like a drum also could be energizing and invigorating, whereas like a harp could help you calm and soothe, and at the same time like let go and release. So the Egyptians also use a variety of sound-based practices, and they use toning, which involves making long, sustained vocal sounds to create a state of deep relaxation and promote healing. They also use mantras, much like the ancient Indians, or sacred words and phrases which were believed to have a powerful vibrational quality that could be used to transform the individual's consciousness. Isha Swaller also did research into ancient Egyptian practices that revealed that they used crystal sound chambers, which were used for also healing and spiritual transformation. They could not only heal the spirit, but also physical ailments within the body. And these chambers were believed to have the power to amplify sound vibrations, creating a powerful healing effect on the individual. So these crystal sound chambers, they were big, they were giant, and there was typically a crystal chamber in the middle, and they were made of large blocks of quartz crystal. So don't imagine like shimmery, clear. It's
like
more
the
like
quartz we find in our garden.
It's more like raw quartz that you'll find, raw quartz stones, and they were carefully cut and polished to create a specific shape and size. And the chambers were designed to be mathematically and acoustically perfect, with the walls and ceilings carefully angled to create a specific resonance and amplification of sound. So the individual seeking healing would enter the chamber, often accompanied by a healer or priest, and that healer or priest would chant or tone specific sounds based on the ailments of the person who's come to seek healing. And the priest would know what tones and what sounds would help different things. So if someone came in with back problems or depression or gut problems, they would know which sounds to chant in order to heal that part. And the sounds would be amplified by the chamber, creating a powerful vibrational effect on the individual's body and mind. And the vibrations were believed to penetrate deep into the body and promote healing. The Egyptians also believed that the crystal sound chambers had a spiritual aspect, and that the vibrations created by the chamber could help to connect the individual to higher states of consciousness. And the chambers were often used for meditation and spiritual practices. The use of crystal sound chambers for healing and spiritual transformation was an important part of ancient Egyptian spiritual practices and beliefs, and most of them did not quite survive to the present day, though there are a few, and there is evidence of their use in ancient texts and artwork. So, yeah, very cool.
Yeah, really cool.
Even in modern day, they use sound frequencies to break down kidney stones within the body by directing specific sound frequencies using machinery, right? But
right.
So yeah, and there's a lot of different medicinal tools.
In like a medical setting?
Yeah, like in a hospital.
Because you hear a lot about like sound healing, and in the hippie and spiritual scene, there's always sound healers knocking around doing their thing, and I don't know too much about it, but it's interesting if it's used like in an actual medical space. And I wonder as well if it's used in Chinese medicine.
Yeah, I mean, Chinese medicine, who knows how it is now, but back when China was very Buddhist, there was a lot of Buddhist chanting and singing, and that would help definitely, because there's this one sound healer in Vancouver, and it was Matthew Kohol or something was his name. And he did Tibetan throat singing, as well as he had all these like awesome instruments in front of him. And holy crap, he would host these sound healings in these artificial Himalayan salt rooms. So everything was Himalayan salt, the walls, the floor, and it was just like, if it wasn't just a feeling of total and utter relaxation and calming, like healing waves that would come over, I would also experience astral projection during those sessions, and it was just really an incredible experience. I've been to gong baths, those are amazing, and even singing bowl ceremonies I've been to as well, and all of them just put you into a state of deep relaxation. And then if you have other spiritual practices, you can use that deep relaxation as like a springboard for other things as well.
Yeah. So. What I found really interesting actually once on a podcast that I was listening to, where they was talking about sound healing, and she was a sound healer, and how she'd have like different sounds per session with different people, and like try out different things, and some things that would be really nice and relaxing for some people would be like really jarring and unbearable for other people. So it's like interesting to think like certain sounds are gonna like trigger certain issues with people and be able to heal them, and others would need like a different sound. And that's what's interesting, what you were saying earlier, how the Egyptians would go into these priests and they would figure out exactly like what it is.
It's like a prescription medication
that someone needs. And interesting as well how they was going to church to a priest, because still today it's looked down upon, I guess, but there's still so many faith healers out there,
right?
And they keep going because obviously some people are having success with these faith healers. So I think as well, like there's the element of belief behind a lot of this stuff,
Well, there is belief when it comes to faith healing, in the sense like Christian faith healing, where it's like it's a priest who's uttering certain things and saying, oh, the power of God heals you. And normally it's just, if the person who's being healed believes that they're being healed, that'll often be the placebo enough for their body to actually do that, because we have the power to heal ourselves. But the difference with that in ancient Egypt is that their spiritual traditions were greatly wrapped up in their sciences. So they weren't separate like our world now, and so they used mathematics and scientific knowledge to construct these practices as well. And when you see it in the medical industry, that they're using sound frequencies in a lot of different areas to help, you can see that it's a shame that the science and the spirit have separated. Because when you have them together, it's just a beautiful experience. Where though most people, when they go to a hospital, it's like anxiety.
Yeah, and there is places now that are starting to bring them together. As I think we are very slowly at the very beginning of a big shift, in consciousness.
Yeah, there are very cool things that are, like, I once sat in this chair for 5 minutes that was doing light therapy on your eyelids, and as well as buzzing certain frequencies, and I was just like, I need this chair. Because it was only a 5-minute trial, because it was just some person who had invented it, and I've seen a lot of cool things like that. But it's like, I just hope that they are allowed to pass through and start making it into the mainstream. Just like, even if you transformed hospital beds into like these buzzing frequency resonators that could help with your body, it would just be such a difference instead of putting you just in this flat metal bed.
And then the environment of a hospital itself is very jarring. It's, it's not in harmony with the spirit at all, and that's why most people, when they go into a hospital setting, you just feel anxious.
I
mean, it doesn't feel good.
Anything, it's those fluorescent lights.
Trey, I don't like fluorescent lights, but you particularly hate them.
Okay, so talking about sound healing, it all sounds quite magical, and it was, because magic was, the ancient Egyptian culture was steeped in magic, and it was believed to be an essential part of everyday life. And magic was seen as a way to connect with the divine, control the forces of nature, and protect oneself from harm. Isha Swaller's research on ancient Egyptian magic sheds light on various ways in which magic was practiced and understood in this culture. One of the key aspects of Egyptian magic was the belief in the power of words and symbols. Words and symbols were seen as having intrinsic power, which could be harnessed through the use of spells and incantations. For example, the hieroglyphic symbol, the Ankh, was believed to have the power to grant eternal life and was often used in funerary rituals, but the Ankh is often lost in its interpretation, and I think the Ankh was more than just a symbol. I think it was a tool, and we kind of explored this in our how the pyramids were built, and
the ancient technology episode, right?
Yeah, ancient technology, and that the Ankh was actually a frequency tool, like a key. And when we think of sound and words to invoke a word is to find the meaning of the word within yourself. It's to invoke its power, and that is not just something, you can hear like a public speaker. And when a public speaker is good, they can move emotions with their words, It's something.
Words are spells.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah. That's why it's called spelling. But it's so true.
It is.
And the English language particularly is pretty effed up with some of the spells.
Right.
Are entwined into our everyday language.
Yeah, just every day we wake up saying good morning, and morning is the sound of death. It's the sound, so it's so
it's already suppressing the spirit, and it's entwined throughout the English language, and it makes a lot of sense.
And that's the difference between these ancient languages. In India, in Egypt, in Sumeria, in a lot of different cultures, even in Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, they said that their language was given to them by the gods or by other forces, and even like studying Sanskrit can increase a lot of your memory and things like that, and learning how to get the proper intonations and invoking them. Even ancient Nordic runes were said to be mirrored by the different shapes within nature, all based around the flower of life symbol. So when you're creating a language in a spiritual way, then the whole language will be imbued with a certain sense of power. Another important aspect of Egyptian magic was the use of amulets and talismans, and these objects were believed to be imbued with specific frequencies and have protective or transformative powers. It's kind of like those hippie things that they wear now, like those Oregon talismans, organite talismans, but probably more complex.
Yeah, and I thought about organite earlier when you was talking about like the crystal healing room, because like the guy who discovered organite, I forget his name, but he was healing people in these rooms, like these rooms he made out of like little boxes that would sit people in and like heal them with the power of organite. And that's why it's seen as so powerful and people use it.
Yeah, so also the practice of divination was very important in Egyptian magic, and divination was used to gain insight into the future and seek guidance from the neters. And one common form of divination involved the use of ostraka, which were small pieces of pottery or stone on which questions were written. The ostraka were then placed in sacred pools of water within the temple, and the way in which they floated or sank was interpreted as a response from the forces of nature. And this is very much like rune casting, when you have lots of little stones with runes and then you tumble them and the runes will speak. As well as runes as well, you can... The thing with runes is...
bones.
Yeah, you can also
anything.
see runes in nature based on like the formation of trees, the way leaves have fallen, the way twigs have fallen on the ground. It's like a way to communicate with the world. And yeah, so it's very cool, because like when I was studying runes, I was beginning to see the runes in the trees and in nature, and I was like, oh, so that's the message that I have to take from this and that. And I never actually fully finished my study on runes.
Yeah, same here.
But yeah, so finally, Schwaller research highlights the importance of ritual and ceremony within Egyptian magic. Rituals were often used to invoke the neters, honor the dead, or mark important life events such as birth or marriage, and these rituals were highly structured and often involved offerings of food, drink, or other items that were believed to be associated with the different neters. So there was like different foods, even in India, you'll put something spicy on the altar of a god that want like spicy food, or because spice represents a certain aspect of nature. Whereas like if you had a calming,
fiery, energetic action.
Yeah. So when it comes to ritual in Egyptian magic, probably nothing is more central or important than the use of plant medicine to aid in these rituals. And the thing that they used was blue lotus. And the blue lotus was held in high regard and used for a variety of purposes, including religious and spiritual rituals. And speaking of blue lotus, we did a great episode on the ancients' use of psychedelic and hallucinogenic plants.
Yeah, and it's a great episode.
It's one of our favorite episodes that we ever made.
It is our favorite episode, and it didn't get as many views as normal. So definitely go check that out, because it's fascinating to learn all about the psychedelics that were used in the ancient world.
Yeah, so the blue lotus was believed to have psychoactive properties and was thought to induce a sense of euphoria as well as heightened consciousness. And Isha Schwaller's research sheds light on the details of Egyptian blue lotus ritual and how the blue lotus drink was concocted. According to Schwaller, the blue lotus was often used in a ritual setting which participants would consume a drink made from the plant. The drink was prepared by steeping the blue lotus flowers and leaves in water, often along with other ingredients such as wine, honey, and spices. and sometimes they would even ferment the leaves within the blue lotus. And there was a modern scientific study done that the most potent effect is when you ferment the blue lotus leaves and flower into a wine. And the mixture was then strained and consumed, often in a communal setting. The ritual itself was highly structured and often involved music, dance, and chanting, and the participants would gather within the sacred space deep within the temple or other religious sites, and they would drink the blue lotus concoction as a part of a larger ritual. The effects of the blue lotus were thought to enhance the spiritual experience of the ritual and to bring participants closer to the divine. Schwaller notes that the Blue Lotus ritual was not just a one-time event, but was often part of a larger spiritual practice. The consumption of the Blue Lotus drink was seen as a way to connect with the divine and to gain insights into the mysteries of the universe.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. You definitely feel so much more connected to nature, connected to spirit and the universe when you're taking psychedelics.
Yeah. And so it was often led by a priest, high priest or priestess within whatever temple or cult they were within, and they were trained in the use of blue lotus and other psychoactive plants. Blue lotus was also used for medicinal purposes, and it was believed to have a pain-relieving and anti-inflammatory properties, and it also was used to treat a variety of ailments, including headaches and menstrual cramps. Yeah, that's very good. So yeah. Now that we've kind of understood some of the rituals and things, let's get into a bit of some of the gods, or neters as they called it, and just briefly run over again the principle of the neters. So the principle of the neters in ancient Egypt refers to the belief in the existence of cosmic forces that represented different aspects of the natural world and human experience, such as the sun, the sky, fertility, and death. According to Isha's book, Erbach, Egyptian Initiate, the true meaning of the neters is that they represent different states of consciousness that can be accessed through spiritual practice. Each neter embodies a particular quality of energy that can be cultivated within oneself through meditation and other spiritual practices. For example, the neter Ra represents the energy of the sun, the awakening of inner consciousness, while the neter Anubis represents the energy of death and transformation. And the book describes how ancient Egyptians viewed the neters as teachers and guides on the path to spiritual enlightenment. Through study and contemplation of the neters, initiates could develop a deeper understanding of the universe and their place within it. And it also emphasizes the importance of developing a personal relationship with the neters, as they can provide guidance and support on the spiritual journey. Isha Schwaller was a French mystic and author who conducted extensive research on ancient Egyptian religion, and according to her, the neters or neterju were divine entities that embodied the various aspects of the universe and the human experience. They were worshipped by the ancient Egyptians as powerful and benevolent, who had the ability to intervene in the lives of humans. Schwaller believed that the neters were not simply deities, but rather the personification of the different forces and principles that govern the world. For example, the neter Ta represented the creative force of the universe and was associated with craftsmen and artists, while the neter Ma'at symbolized the principle of balance and harmony and was worshipped as the neter of truth and justice. The neters were often depicted in the forms of animals, which Schwaller believed was a way to express their different qualities and attributes. Not that they didn't believe that these beings with different animal heads actually existed. They were metaphors to express their different qualities. For example, the neter Horus was depicted as a falcon, which represented his ability to soar above the world and see things from a higher perspective. The neter Thoth was depicted as an ibis, which represented his wisdom and intelligence. And Schwaller also believed that the neters were not limited to the physical world, but existed in a higher realm of consciousness, and she referred to this realm as the world of the neters, and believed that it was accessible to humans through meditation and other spiritual practices. So within ancient Egypt, it depends on the varying kind of eras within Egypt. So way back, there weren't really separate cults to the different gods. Everything was intertwined because they believed that everything was intertwined, but you would go to the temple of Horus, the temple of Ra, the temple of Isis, depending on what you were wanting to invoke. And so, but as kind of time went by, different rulers, different pharaohs, different things began to rise, certain gods and certain goddesses, and it's like we almost forgot the true meaning of the word. But there's a bunch of different cults, and I'll just go into two. The main thing that is linked with all of them is that you use it to connect with them through different offerings, rituals, hymns, and prayers. And so I'm going to skip past the Ra one and kind of go into the cult of Isis and Osiris. So one of the most important aspects of the cult of Isis was its emphasis on the divine feminine. Isis was seen as a powerful goddess who embodied the principle of fertility, nurturing, and healing. The cult taught the power of the goddess was available to all, and that both men and women could tap into the divine feminine within themselves in order to achieve spiritual growth and healing. Another aspect of the cult of Isis was its use of ritual and symbolism. The cult incorporated a wide range of symbols and images, including the lotus flower, the ankh, and the serpent. These symbols were used in rituals and meditations to help practitioners connect with Isis and a deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them. The cult also placed a strong emphasis on personal transformation and spiritual growth. Practitioners were encouraged to engage in practices such as meditation, visualization, and dream work in order to achieve a greater understanding of their own psyches and the workings of the universe. So that's kind of a common thread through all of them, but it's just like what kind of forces they were trying to connect with, but within it. And there's also a lot of secrecy, so the cults were imbued with secrets and initiations. So it's not common knowledge. These things would not have been written down, but some things would be written down, but the priests and the initiates said themselves that the hieroglyphics and the texts would mean different things because the initiates would be told the secret meaning of these hieroglyphs, whereas the commoners would just see maybe a description of a couple of things. The initiates and the priests would see something completely different. So unless you were initiated yourself and you knew the different meanings of the hieroglyphs, you would not know the secrets. So it's hard for us in the modern day to know what they actually did now. But the cult of Osiris was an interesting one because it was also more related to the death and rebirth. And, death and rebirth is a very common thing within ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptians were very focused on death. And you kind of, when you begin to look at the story of Isis and Osiris, Osiris was killed by his brother Set, which was chaos. And Osiris was meant to represent a sort of order. And he was killed by a brother, and Isis resurrected him and immaculately conceived their child Horus. And when you kind of relate this, it's very similar to Christian beliefs as well. Yeah. The mother Isis, the mother Mary and the mother Isis, they both gave birth in immaculate conception. And in the cult of Isis, they heavily believed in the potential for immaculate conception, that one could draw a soul from the world into their body. And that was the kind of one of the heights of the feminine practice, whereas the male practice through Osiris, it was mainly focused on rebirth and reincarnation. So just like with Jesus, he was killed and he traveled through the afterlife and then was reborn again. So that's kind of the thing with Osiris, and that it's becoming a master of death, that the final spiritual gateway is death itself. And if you can make it through that gateway and pass that initiation of Osiris, then you become a master. So one could say that Jesus was a master of the teachings of Osiris. Yeah. Cool. So let's just get into a little bit of the initiation, and because it's a very complex and multifaceted system. But Isha Schwaller's book, The Egyptian Initiate, provides an insightful and detailed examination of the initiation process. And at the core of Egyptian mysticism is the belief that the universe is a living, breathing organism with every part of it interconnected and imbued with divine energy. The initiation process within ancient Egypt religion was designed to help individuals tap into this energy and align themselves with the divine will, allowing them to access higher states of consciousness and achieve spiritual enlightenment. So the initiation process began with a period of intense spiritual preparation in which the initiate was required to purify their body and mind through a series of rigorous practices. These included fasting, meditation, and ritual purification ceremonies, all of which were designed to help the initiate shed their worldly attachments and connect with the spiritual realm. So you have to be clear, you have to be a clean vessel in order to connect with the divine energies. Once the initiate had achieved a state of spiritual readiness, they would be taken through a series of initiatory rites that were designed specifically to step-by-step awake their innermost consciousness and connect them with the divine energies of the universe. These rites were highly symbolic and involved the use of sacred objects, symbols, and types of ritualized movements. And at the heart of the initiation process was the concept of ma'at, which is the Egyptian term for balance and harmony. The initiatory rites were designed to help the initiate achieve a state of inner balance and alignment, enabling them to connect with the divine energies of the universe. And throughout the initiation process, the initiate was guided by a spiritual mentor known as a sage, who provided them with guidance and support as they navigated the challenging path towards spiritual enlightenment. And some of the spiritual practices that these initiates would go through were, other than the purification and transformation, it was one of the key practices of Egyptian initiation was meditation. And meditation was seen as a means of quieting the mind and allowing the initiate to connect to the divine. There was ritual, and they also had to observe certain dietary restrictions and engage in physical exercises intended to purify the body, as well as read spiritual texts like the Book of the Dead or the Book of the Coming of the Fourth Day. The Book of Coming Forth by Day. And the texts were seen as wisdom and guidance. And finally, the initiation ceremony itself was a significant ritual. So the structure of the ceremony, should we get into the structure of the ceremony?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
If you think it's interesting.
Yeah, so the ancient Egyptian ritual temple ceremony was designed and conducted in specifically constructed temples, and the temples were made to represent the structure of the universe itself. So they were designed with sacred geometry aligned with the stars, aligned with certain earth energies and everything. Wow.
Kind of like the pyramids.
Exactly, yeah. So the first level of the ceremony was focused on purification, like we said before, and involved a series of physical and mental exercises designed to cleanse the individual of impurities. The second level of the ceremony was focused on illumination, and this was the meditation and attaining a deeper understanding of the mysteries of life and death. And this ceremony was often accompanied by sounds, chants, incense, and sacred music. The third level of the ceremony was focused on transformation and involved a series of rituals practiced to help the individual transcend their physical limitations. And here is a couple examples of some of the Egyptian rituals. One of them is called Feast of the Beautiful Reunion, and it is performed in honor of the Neter Isis and her husband Osiris, who represent the principles of resurrection and regeneration. The ritual is conducted in a sacred chamber that is only accessible to the initiated and is led by a priest or priestess who has been trained in the mysteries of the cult. The first step is, of course, purification, which involves bathing in special water and donning clean linen garments. Then the participants enter the sacred chamber, which is decorated with symbolic images and artifacts. And then they perform some invocations, some chanting, offering of the blue lotus, and the priest and priestess invokes the presence of Osiris. So this is a big thing, invoking the presence.
Yeah.
And that would be done through sound and just connection to that particular neter. And then they would do some dancing.
After sipping on a bit of the blue lotus wine.
Yeah, exactly.
That to loosen up, do a bit of dancing.
Yeah, another cool one was practice was called mind fasting. And it involves quieting the mind and focusing on a single thought or image for an extended period. And this is very similar to in ancient India, and it's called something.
I know, like, that's a real thing. A lot of people are focused on in brain training.
Yeah. And in ancient India, they would focus on a single object until the object ceased to become the object.
Yeah,
and
we
its
spoke
true
about
essence,
that.
Was revealed.
I forgot what episode.
Yeah, they also visualized oneself as a lotus flower opening up to the sun.
It was the superpower episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to know more about that, the superpower, ancient superpowers yogic episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, visualization was important, imagining oneself as a lotus flower opening up to the sun, because visualization is a very strong meditative component, because your mind doesn't actually distinguish between visual stimuli and internal stimuli. They're both as real.
Yeah, because when I have connected with like deity, and I guess like I didn't know about this netters thing, but even when I worked with Sekhmet, it began from me visualizing, so in the mind's eye, and then it just takes a life of its own, and you're no longer in control of the visualization, and then this is when I believe I'm really connecting with that energy, and I'm receiving guidance and messages.
And you weren't even trying to connect with this person, were you?
With Sekhmet I was.
Oh, you were?
I did the whole ritual that you wash your hair beforehand, you light red candles, I was really doing everything to the book to invoke her. But yeah, the message that came through was like, you're still on this other journey, like you don't need to invoke me. But it was interesting, and she gave me a lot of real world clarification, which a lot of like spirits and deities I work with do for me, because they know I sort of need that, like the synchronicities to show up in the real world. And but I always do often, it was Iris that showed up uncalled upon, that I think you're thinking of. But
and then I had a dream of Iris as well.
Yeah, most of the time when I work with spirits, I start off just like they do in this, with a visualization, which then takes its own form, and you're no longer guiding it. So that to me makes a lot of sense, because it's worked for me.
Yeah. And another important one is dream interpretation. Mm-hmm. The Egyptians believed that dreams are a way for the divine to communicate with the human world, and dream interpretation was therefore an important spiritual practice, and initiates were trained to interpret their dreams as a means of gaining insight into their spiritual path. And we see that a lot. Even Carl Jung, who's a relatively modern psychologist, and he was his work was heavily imbued with dream work. And he would often sit on his chair with a heavy metal ball in his hand, and he would meditate and go into a liminary state and observe his dreams. And then if he fell to fall into his dreams, his hand would, relax, the ball would fall and it would wake him up, and then he'd write down what he saw.
Great technique.
Yeah, cool technique if you can fall asleep sitting up. There was also this meditation called anapanasati meditation.
Cool word.
Which was also meditation on the breath. And the book describes the practice of observing and regulating the breath as a means of calming the mind and entering a meditative state. All these things are very similar to the 8 limbs of yoga, which are laid out. Diet, way of living, purification, breathing, visualization, chanting, contemplation, walking meditation, posture, and physical alignment. These are all part of ancient Egyptian that is also, shares a common thread.
And just like earlier you were saying about, the same kind of energy representing Isis and representing Mother Mary, like I do find like a lot of the religions are connected in some way, or they're taking from.
Right, because the Egyptians were drawing on universal archetypes, forces, but they just had different names and different symbols for them.
Yeah, and if you're going to channel something straight in, it's going to come through slightly differently for different people.
Cultures.
But overall, you're getting this same message, you know?
Yeah, and it's about, they approached it in one way, different cultures approached it in another way. But the thing with these neters is that they're universal forces, like time, rebirth. These things are everywhere. You can't escape this. You can't escape these principles within nature, and that's what the neters were. Fertility, creation, destruction, chaos, birth, rebirth, all these things are, the sky, the moon, sun, rain, earth. They're all just things that are present in our physical world. And the neters were just symbols and ways to connect with different aspects of reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that comes to an end.
Awesome. This is fascinating.
Yeah. I thought it's very, very cool to just get into this dive, and I really appreciate Isha Schwaller's work, because so much of mainstream archaeology just kind of makes our ancient ancestors seem like stupid, or just like, oh, they were pagan god worshippers, and that these gods were
not
fake.
That pagans are stupid.
No. A lot of tonality within modern day science is that god worshipping is like an inferior sort of thing, because science are very nihilistic, they're very atheist. And so modern archaeologists a lot of the time kind of dismiss it as like, oh, they were just god worshippers, but this was actually a real way to like connect with principles of nature and the universe, and their practices were very heavily based in their own understanding of science and the universe, and you can see how advanced it was based on the ancient megalithic sites and their connection with the stars and everything.
Yeah, and it's thanks to people like her and people like Graham Hancock who are questioning, the status quo on ancient Egypt.
Yeah, and really putting themselves in the shoes of the ancients and not viewing it from a modern perspective. It's really about getting into the culture and trying to understand what it was like to be living at that time, to be, even just as a regular farmer or worker, you would know and have understanding of these different universal principles, and you would be you wouldn't have the knowledge of the initiates, but you would be praying and to balance or to fertility, and you would be speaking of these universal forces. The symbols and would be everywhere. You'd go to the different temples for if you wanted more fertility for your crops, all that stuff. So it's really cool to just put yourself into those shoes and get a deeper insight, because a lot of the time when I surf the internet for like rites, you don't really get much, but her book really illuminates a lot of stuff, so it's very cool.
Yeah, and it's like there's still parts of this that hold up still today in the modern world. Like when you was mentioning the crops, it just made me think straight away we live in like the farming zone of southern France, and speaking with the farmers here, like they still plant by the moon, you know, so they're still using the phases of the moon to know when to plant their seeds and harvest their crops and stuff. So you know, people still believe in a lot of this stuff.
Yeah,
still happening today. It's interesting.
Definitely.
Great episode, guys. Thank you so much for sticking with us this long.
Yeah, and we'll try and record another episode. We're taking a little break and we're leaving France for a bit.
But I don't know whether it will affect the channel. I don't think we will be going longer than 2 weeks before another episode comes up. So
we may miss 1 or 2 weeks.
Might be in a different location next time we're recording, but we're
gonna do our best to keep up, and hopefully we can record another episode before we have to leave, and then we'll definitely record while we're in London. And so thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was interesting. If you have any other information, anything you guys want to share about ancient Egypt and their mystical beliefs, we would love to hear it, and you can discuss it in the comments. And if you haven't checked out, we have a whole backlog of episodes on our audio platform because we started there. So you can go and check us out. The links are in the description. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.